Welcome back Internet, IG here with another video, and today we're checking out probably one of the rising stars of the Linux world at the moment, and it's for very different reasons than pretty much every other distro that is on kind of that top 5 rising star list. Contrasting very, very strongly with a project that I looked at last week, or 2 weeks ago now, Elementary OS. MX Linux is gaining quite a bit of traction and a very strong fan base or user base behind it for basically the opposite of all of the reasons that Elementary is successful, or distributions like Elementary are successful. So what do I mean by that? Well, we're going to dig into that today, and hopefully we're going to find out what makes MX Linux unique. So it's almost impossible to talk about MX Linux without giving a very brief history recap. And I'm not up to date with all of the details about the history of this distribution, but what I do know is that once upon a time, and to be honest, I did try this distribution back in its day, but only towards the tail end of its lifespan or popularity, and that was simply Mepis or Mepis Linux. Mepis Linux was one of the original Linux distributions that tried to do something very novel and very original, and that was to be user-friendly. What? I know, that's crazy. What were they thinking? To be honest, this distribution was trying to do the user-friendliness of Linux in a day where it was Mandrake, when it was Red Hat, when it was SUSE, and a lot of these distributions weren't easy for regular Joes to get their heads around. And so simply Mepis or Mepis Linux decided to make a distribution that would run well in a live CD or live DVD environment, so that it would make it easy for people to try it out. This was something that wasn't commonplace back then, and also to try and create some tools and give the user some tools that would give them a graphical user interface to do some of the stuff that these other Linux operating systems could do, but only through the command line. So by providing some graphical user interface tools, and by trying to make the distribution as user-friendly as possible, Mepis, and then later Simply Mepis, made a name for itself. And they kind of jumped between using a Debian base and an Ubuntu base, and back to a Debian base. And that is kind of the background of half of this distribution. The other half is got to do with Antix, Anti-X or Antix. Anyway, so that distribution was all about creating a super lightweight environment using a very up-to-date kernel and being able to run on older computers. Now, what MX Linux represents is a hybrid or a collaboration between these two projects. And together, these guys have become, in my opinion, a lot bigger and possibly a lot more successful as a project than either one of them were on their own. Now, obviously, Mepis and Simply Mepis definitely had a dedicated user base back in the day, and that's why we are still talking about the Mepis project today, because it obviously represents a lot of early innovation towards making Linux accessible for the everyday person. And so I'm all about that, and so that's why I've been wanting to check this distribution out for a while. So most of what MX Linux boils down to is a Debian base, XFCE desktop on top, and a bunch of custom tools. And honestly, these tools are MX Linux's moneymaker, if you will. So in here, you've got a bunch of different things that you can use to manage different parts of your system. And if we are going to contrast this with something that also claims to be for new users, a project like Elementary, and even in some cases, you could argue Ubuntu as well, this is the kind of, these tools right here represent the kind of bridge that new users need to actually properly learn how Linux works, instead of trying to gloss over the functionality and the power that lies below the hood with Linux. MX Linux provides tools that show the user how to do it and hold their hand through the process, but at the same time it introduces them to the power that lies beneath, rather than just trying to give a simple switch to try and customize or set their system up in the same way that maybe Windows or Mac OS would. So just to run through these really quickly, Live USB Maker does what it says. Snapshot is a very interesting feature where you can create an ISO snapshot of your system as it is currently set up, and you can offload it to maybe an NFS server or maybe an external hard drive, and you can keep your in a sense, you can keep your system backed up through this little snapshot gig, which is pretty sweet. Also, boot options. You can customize a lot of the boot menu here rather than going through and customizing the grub menu itself. You can come in here and change everything using a GUI tool. Again, very useful for those who might accidentally screw up their bootloader. And boot repair is something that I think every Linux distribution should have on hand at some point, because chances are if you're trying to fiddle around with a dual boot setup, you will need to repair grub at some point, because Windows Update will come through and completely hose your grub bootloader or something like that. So the ability to be able to boot back into MX Linux using a live USB and repair grub using a GUI tool here from the live CD is really helpful. So cleanup is a little less aggressive than what some of the disk cleanup tools are, and they give you a quick link here to run the disk usage analyzer to see how much space you've got free, which is pretty handy as well. And you can run this on a schedule as well, which is nice. So if you know for a fact that you're not going to need any of these temporary files, then you can do that. Again, there's a bit of a theme developing here where a lot of this stuff, it doesn't try to hide the complexity of Linux, but it does give you simple options to kind of hold your hand through the process. Menu editors and user managers do what they say, but there are some cool stuff in the user manager here where you can, a lot of complexity is around the idea of users and groups and how permissions are handled and all that kind of thing. And again, this tool gives a bridge to be able to A, understand what's going on, and B, be able to customize and be able to manage those things when stuff goes wrong, compared to on Ubuntu, for example, where you've really got to go digging through some of the GNOME settings, and even then you're not going to get to the level of detail that these guys will give you. So the ability to, for example, copy one user profile over to another, or maybe share a folder, that kind of thing, that's all stuff that you can set up very, very easily using the MX User Manager, compared to it being quite a convoluted process on other distributions. Again, NVIDIA driver installers, gosh, everybody needs one of these at some point in their life. Codex Installer does what it says. Conky, you can manage this little widgety thing on the side. There's a bunch of different themes that you can use. So if we go back to the folder here, look at all these themes that they've got out of the box. So let's just open this up and then open that up. We'll stop it and then run it, and then you can see we've changed the Conky theme there. So you can customize this for however you like using this little GUI tool. It's very, very helpful. Again, these are all just little tiny tools that don't do bucket loads, but they do help with trying to make this desktop work for you, and maybe troubleshoot things along the way. Now, MX Tweak, custom tweak tool to be able to manage what's going on here on your desktop, including the theme, the compositor, different configuration options, what login you're using, all of that fun stuff. And like, just for kicks, let's try using the Numix theme and icons. And it has reloaded things to a degree, and oh, there it is. So we're now running the Numix icons and themes, although not all of these icons have switched over yet, so I'd say I might need to do a login, log out. But I'm using the theme, so that's fun. There's a universal dark theme, which is also very nice, but we'll switch it back to what it was originally, which is the light theme. Okay, so tweak tool, very helpful, very good. Of course, you get a welcome screen like most good Linux distributions do nowadays, and I do want to make a quick shout out to their popular apps section, because again, this is kind of like a software center, but again, it doesn't hide options from the user. It just makes things a little bit easier for those who either already know what they're doing or want to learn how to do things using a more advanced tool. So, for example, you want to install popular packages. A lot of these are selected by the community and are arguably the most popular programs out there when it comes to installing apps on a Linux desktop. So simple checkbox and click apply or install, and it will go out and grab those packages and install them for you. And for those of you wondering, yes, Steam is here along with Play on Linux and other popular games. So there's not really much in the way, there's not really much lacking here in terms of packages because it is using Debian on the back end. And the other cool thing is that you can actually filter a lot of your packages by the different repos that it draws from. For example, the stable repo, that this is Debian, the MX test repository. So maybe stuff that they're thinking about adding in. Debian backports. So this is going to be coming from the sort of upstream Debian version or the next version of Debian. So it might compromise your system stability a little bit, but you've got it there if you want to have a more up-to-date package for any particular app you may have installed. And finally, Flatpak support is here as well. So if there is a more universal package that you want to go out and grab, you've got easy access here to a bunch of different Flatpaks, a total of 447 different Flatpak apps available here at the click of a button. The fact that this is all included under the one package installer is quite remarkable. And yes, it's not the prettiest thing out there, but the functionality that it gives you, it doesn't hide any of the details about what version you're running and the package names and all of that kind of thing, where these packages come from. It's very, very transparent, but it's very handy and very simple to use. In a lot of ways, it feels as if MX Linux provides the user experience that a lot of Linux users want, but for some reason no one thinks to make, because everybody's trying to make things really simple, and by doing so taking a lot of functionality away from the user. They've got some other stuff here in terms of repo managing tools, network assistance, sounds, all of that fun stuff. Now there's two other things that I want to stress before we wrap up here, and that is that out of the box you get a very, very, very decent selection of software. You get a lot of great stuff out of the box. A lot of these choices I would probably personally make myself. So you can go through the menu there and see all of the apps and stuff that you have at your disposal as soon as you install the system. The other thing that I wanted to comment was just how quick and snappy this distribution feels. There's no extra cruft running despite all of the apps and everything that you have installed by default. It really is a very lean system, and it's very responsive. And you're really not going to be left hanging around at all. And I think it caters well to users with older hardware, not only because the distribution itself is very lightweight, but also they still offer a 32-bit version of their distribution as well, which not a whole lot of distributions do nowadays. I guess my only knockback or criticism of MX Linux is the fact that this panel layout by default is not exactly my jam. It doesn't seem like the most intuitive thing ever, but again, it's all configurable. You can move this around as much as you like. It's XFC at the end of the day. You can do what you want with it. But the semi-rolling release structure of MX Linux, combined with all of the custom tools, a vast catalog of packages, all available under one central package management tool, add into the mix a lot of stability, excellent performance, and sensible and functional design choices, and you've really got a Linux user's dream distribution. And I can see and I can appreciate why so many people are loving this distribution right now. This is one of those distributions that you might look at on the surface and go, meh, it's another XFCE Debian-based distribution, but the more that you dig around in it and the more that you play around with it and give it time to, be able to customize it how you want, you're going to be very impressed by what this distribution provides under the hood, because it's got a lot of great stuff going for it. Well, that'll be all from me today. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely give the video a thumbs if you liked it, and subscribe if you like this content on a regular basis. And I will see you all in the very next video. Peace out, ladies and gentlemen.